Hello, I'm Graham Horton. Welcome to today's video, which is part 4 of this brand new series looking at using the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 camera for absolute beginners. Now this is part 4 and today we're going to be looking at shooting video with this camera. And as usual, I produced a little handout that will go with this series. You'll find it in the download section of my photographic blog, and I'll put a link to that in the video description below. So if you wanted to download this and then follow along with it, then that's fine. Otherwise you can use this as a handy reference after the event. So as usual, I've got my setup here to be able to record the back of the screen so you can see in practical terms how we use video with the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 82 camera. Now it's fair to say that Panasonic really undersold themselves when they produced this camera with some of the features, like there's no audio input, so that does limit you to using the onboard internal microphones if you're using it that way, or you have to separately record the audio with an audio recorder, such as I'm doing now. I'm using the Rode Wireless Go 2 and I'm recording this with a Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, so you can actually record the audio separately in the audio note-taking feature of a smartphone, or you could use a pocket recorder, something like that, but you need then to be able to synchronize that audio to the video track, and I'll show you that in a later portion of another video. But today we'll be concentrating on just seeing how you can shoot video, what's the best method to shoot it, and why you should use one mode over the other. If you're an absolute beginner, there's absolutely no reason why you can't just turn this top control dial to the IA position, which puts the camera into fully automatic mode, and then just press the red button on the top of the camera, and that will record video for you without too much concern over the settings that you might want to use to get even better videos. But what I want to do is move away from that and first of all talk about the other modes, and they give you extra options like you saw in the stills mode, where you can change the photo style, so you can actually set the photo style to the type of scene that you're using. So for example, if you're taking portraits, you can use the portrait mode rather than the default standard mode, which might be too vibrant for a portrait mode. So you've got the options there to change the photo style. You've also got other ways of changing the metering and things like that. So we'll talk about that as we go through this video. So let me show you first of all what options are available in the fully automatic mode, and then we'll look at the other modes that you can shoot using that red button. But ultimately I want to get you away from red button recording and get into the creative video, and that opens up all the other possibilities for some great ways of recording video with this camera. So let's start the recording in the IA position. So at the moment I've got the camera set in the P mode. I'm going to turn the top control dial to the IA position, and you can see that's mirrored on the top left hand side of your display by showing you the IA symbol and then showing you the scene type that the camera has determined as most suitable for what it's seeing through the sensor. So this is it's taking a landscape mode. If I have to press the shutter button, you can see the focus points that the camera will consider for focus, and you can see the other parameters I've got set there. So we've got things like the standard photo style, so you only have that option in the IA mode or monochrome, and we've got the camera set up for a 16:9, which is the video format, and it's MP4 and full HD. If I wanted to change the mode that the camera works in, and I suggest that you might want to shoot in 4K, even if you're going to play it back onto a 1080p television, the amount of resolution or sharpness you get with 4K is going to pay you dividends. So I always tend to record in 4K, whether I'm using it for 4K or 1080p. You get the best advantages there. You can actually crop into your scene and change the aspect ratio and the composition by using the 4K format. So to do that, you would need to go into the menu, and under the record quality, just cursor up to record quality, press the button, and you can see that we can actually go into 4K, 25 or 30. I'm going to be using the 30 mode because if any videos I want to put in here will have to mirror the YouTube format, which is normally 30p. So we'll shoot in 4K 30, so I'll select that, and you can see the other functions there, same as you get for still pictures. The AFS, which is the autofocus single shot, the AFF, which is autofocus flexible, and the autofocus continuous. You've also got continuous autofocus, so while your camera is pointing at the scene, when it's recording, it's going to try and change focus. I don't like it doing that. Sometimes it starts to hunt, so you'll see that I've got continuous autofocus turned off in this instance. So I'm going to leave it turned off. Just quickly look through there. Stabilizer will obviously be on. Conversion, we're not going to be using close-up lenses or the teleconverter, so don't need to worry about that. Noise cancellation for wind, you can leave that on. The zoom mic, again, if you zoom in, it tends to increase the gain of the microphone and it picks up a lot more camera noise, so I would tend to leave that off. Photo style, again, you've only got the option of standard or monochrome, so we'll be shooting in standard so we can actually get colour. Snap movie will allow you just to capture a few seconds of video. Record format, normally you've got the choice between AVC HD or MP4. Now AVC HD is a more compressed format. You get more detail if you like, but with larger file sizes. Better shoot in MP4, it's easier to edit, and if you're shooting in 4K, that is really the only option you will have for 4K. Record quality, again, we just set up. So those are the options that we'll be looking at in the IA Plus or IA fully automatic mode. Let's just take a few seconds of video with that and let's have a look at it. I'm against the light, so we've got a stream here with a lot of highlights on. I'm just going to press the red button on top of the camera. On my particular camera, I've stuck a little plastic jewel on there. It gives me a more tactile feel of where that button is. So it saves fumbling around trying to find the depression in that button. It's much easier to find that jewel than it is the depression. So I'm just going to press that for a few seconds and you can see we're recording video. You get the flashing red icon on the top right hand side, which indicates that you are recording video, and at the bottom of the screen on the right hand side you'll see the amount of time remaining for this particular clip. 15 minutes is the normal length you'll get with 4K, and 29 minutes 59 seconds in full HD because of the restraints placed on camera manufacturers for this type of a recorder. With the automatic exposure mode, you've got access to exposure compensation if you find that the metering isn't getting the exposure correct. You can't change it while you're video recording in the IA mode, so if you find that your scene is going to be overexposed or underexposed, you can change that before you start recording by using the back control dial on the FZ80 So if I wanted to make the scene a little bit darker, then I can go to the minus like that. And then when I start recording by pressing that red button, you'll see that we've got a darker picture. You can't change that during recording. If you try to press the button in, you'll notice that you're changing the aperture and the shutter speed. And that will be changing the ISO for this particular shot. So it doesn't give you any benefit. Well, predictably it started to rain again today, so it's not too heavy at the moment and it looks as though it might pass over without causing me much problems for the camera. So I'm going to continue for a moment just to see how far we get. We're going to go into the program mode now. The program auto is like the same for still photography. It brings up a lot more features that your camera can use. So for example, you can use different photo styles. You're not limited to color or black and white. You've got the action of going there to landscape, portrait, vivid, monochrome. You can change those with the photo style. So again, turn the top control dial until you see the P, and then you can use the menu set to go into photo styles and change them for whichever scene type you want. So let's do scenery today as we're outside. You can then again change exposure compensation before you start shooting, again by using the back control dial. So it's gone a little bit darker there, so I'm going to go to +1/3, and then again start recording by using the red button to start the recording. Now, unlike in the stills mode where the program auto mode, you can actually change the combination of aperture and shutter speed. So if I wanted more depth of field, I could use, say, the aperture there of f5 with a shutter speed of 60 with ISO 80. But when you start to record in the video mode, it will override those and it will probably select aperture of f2.8 and whatever shutter speed it needs to record at that ISO of 80. So it doesn't honor the program shift settings that you might have placed before you start to record video. So remember, it doesn't honor the program shift parameters when you start recording in the P mode. All other modes, if you select aperture or shutter priority, again you can set up any of those parameters, but when you start to record in the red button mode, you'll find that they'll default to using program auto settings. So again, you're not gaining any benefits by using anything other than P for this particular red button recording. The big advantages will be when you switch over to the creative video mode, where you've then got the option of program auto, aperture priority, shutter priority, or complete manual control, as you'll see when I change over to the manual mode. So let's just take a few seconds of video in the shutter priority mode with the scenery type, and you can compare that to the auto mode with the standard photo style. So again, bottom right hand side, you can see the countdown of the remaining time for recording in this particular clip. So we're down to 14 minutes 50 seconds there, and the camera is recording in 4K 30 frames per second. In the handout guide, you'll see all the relevant information about the choice of codecs, whether you should use AVCHD or MP4, and what these codecs actually do for the video recording. If you're an absolute beginner, it doesn't really make any difference for you. I would tend to shoot in the MP4 mode, as that gives you most flexibility in editing. And until fairly recently, AVC wasn't even supported on some of the Apple Mac computers, so you were stuck with the MP4 file. So tend to stay with MP4, much easier to edit, and you can get along great with those files. I want now to shoot in the manual mode, and what I'm going to do is turn the top control dial to the creative video mode. So that's the video camera with the M symbol on it, echoed on the top left hand side of your screen there, the M. And if I go into the setup, again you've got the control of photo styles, and if we go into page 2, our recording quality, again I'm shooting in 4K in 30 frames per second, but exposure mode, we've either got program auto, aperture priority, shutter priority, or complete manual control. P is just what we've been really shooting with. If I go into aperture priority, it'll now allow me to change the aperture, and if you notice, I can control the aperture with the top control dial here, the back wheel, and that will change the aperture. Will change the amount of depth of field recorded by the camera, and what it will do is change the shutter speed to accommodate the exposure. Again, the ISO is set to 80, but if I wanted to change that again, I can actually use the ISO button on the four-way navigation dial, and I can either go into auto or pre-select one of the fixed ISO speed. So it's quite dull today, so I'm going to go for ISO 100, and let's see how it performs. If I half press the shutter button, you see we've got focus lock, and it's focusing on the little rectangle that I've got set in the middle. Remember, you can change that with the cursor dial, you can change the size of the focus point, or you can change the position, or of course you can use the touch screen to point wherever you want the camera to consider as principal focus. So let's say that's the point of interest we want on that clump of reeds there coming out of the water. We can either use the red button or we can use the shutter button to capture the video. So I'm going to press the main shutter button, and you can see we're starting recording. Again, we're in 4K 30, so we've got a 15-minute clip length, and the camera's set that aperture at f4.5, and it will be adjusting the shutter speed accordingly to give the correct exposure. So that's just a few minutes of that. We can have a look at that in the video. Let's stop that recording. We'll change the aperture to a little bit bigger, so we'll go up to f8. See the image is going darker as the camera is selecting f8, means we've probably gone past the 25th of a second, so it'd be better if we went up a little bit further to 200 ISO. And again, I'll start recording using the shutter button, and again you've got that 15-second clip length limit. And you notice now in the manual mode we've got control of exposure compensation, so in real time I can press the back control dial, and you can see that I can brighten the scene by going to the plus, or I can make the scene darker by going to the minus, which is great if you're in a situation where the light is changing constantly, so the sun's keep coming out and going behind clouds. You can change the exposure by using that back control dial. Again, if you wanted to go into shutter priority, and this is the mode that's been recommended by most cinematographers, keep the shutter speed equal to twice the frame rate of the camera. So if we're shooting at a 30 frames per second frame rate, we should set the shutter to 1/60th of a second, which is twice the frame rate, and that gives us the best cinematic look for the video. So at the moment it's selecting a 25th of a second, so what we have to do is to make that up to 1/60th of a second, and it will change the ISO in the auto ISO to give us the correct exposure. So let me put that to auto with a 60th of a second, and I can change the exposure compensation if I felt the scene was too dark or too light. So as our 60th of a second, just darken off the scene a little bit. When I start recording, it will be changing the aperture and it will change the ISO dependent on the lighting conditions. Stop recording, press the shutter button, and again now if we go into the exposure mode full in manual, then that allows us to change the aperture, shutter speed and ISO. Now in this mode you don't get exposure compensation, the same as you don't in stills mode. You balance the exposure by controlling the aperture, shutter speed and ISO. So we want a shutter speed of 1/60th for our correct shutter speed relative to the frame rate. So what I'm going to do is first of all try and change the aperture so that the exposure meter in the bottom is going to go towards the 0 position or slightly under if I wanted to get a little bit more detail in highlight. So in this situation with ISO of 80, my aperture would be f4.5 and my shutter speed would be 1/60th, which should give us some good video. So let's just record a section of video in that mode. Again, you can see we've got our 15-minute clip length dictated to by the file size on the SD card. Now, one thing you may be aware of is movement of the camera when you're recording video. There's something called rolling shutter. So as the camera is moving, because the sensor is being scanned from bottom to top, as you move the camera, things are changing within that frame that the codec or the recording facility hasn't really caught up with. So you end up with distortions and motions on the film which you may not want to see. So it's better if you can shoot from a tripod or some sort of stabilizer for your camera, maybe a gimbal, to smooth out some of the movements. I'm going to try and demonstrate that by just locking off this tripod a little bit so I can move the camera around. And I'll just do a slight panning action while it's recording, and you'll be able to see this distortion on the screen. So let me start recording again at 60th of a second, f4.5, and I'm just going to move the camera from side to side, and you might be able to see some disturbance in the video. The quicker you move it, the more there'll be a disturbance of the feature. So we'll try and do a very, very slow, smooth pan. And we can see if we see any artifacts in the video. Maybe pan down to this water from the little stream that's running by. And then we'll pan upstream. So the stiller the camera is, the better your video will be. That's going to be particularly noticeable if you're going to be using the longer focal lengths. And in the background there is Rivington Pike just appearing through the trees. So what I'm going to do is to zoom in so we can try and capture the pike. And you notice that I've got eye zoom on, so we're going into the blue section, and that gives me 3360mm equivalent focal length. So that is quite a magnification. Pressing the shutter button halfway down to force it to reacquire focus. I'm going to try and hold the camera as still as I can on the tripod. There's still a little bit of shake going on there, but that's the quality you'll get with ISO 80 with f5.9 with that 3360mm zoom. So let's just back that off a little bit to more realistic 2000 millimeters. We'll go down to the optical limit of 1200 millimeters. With the 4K crop, that puts us up to about 1600 millimeters. So that's the sort of quality you'll get on full magnification on a dull day like today with the FZ80 So I'm now going to try and record some video with the FZ80 as a sort of camera interview. I'm still in the manual control mode, so exposure won't change. Again, I've got an aperture of f4.5, and you can see that I set up for face detect and eye detect. So as I turn the camera around, the camera should be able to pick up my face and give you a focus point. So I'm going to turn the camera around. I'll stand a little bit further back so it should be able to focus me, and I'll press the record button, and you're going to get the sound first of all from the Samsung Galaxy. So first of all, you've got the sound from the Samsung Galaxy using the Rode Wireless Go microphone. Using the internal microphones, this is the sound coming from the camera now using the internal microphones that you'd have only available if you didn't have a separate audio recorder. So outside with wind noise, you probably find that it's going to be intrusive. It's quite windy today, so there's going to be a bit of wind noise coming from those microphones. So this is about a meter away from the lens, and hopefully it's got me in focus and my head's not cut off, because with the disadvantage with the FZ80 is you don't have a flip screen, you can't see what you're recording. I could switch over to the Panasonic image app and control the camera from the image app, but again, that's a lot of messing around to enable you to get some video shots. So hopefully that will give you some idea of the audio and video quality using the internal mics and the camera. Now it started to rain quite heavily, so I'm going to pack the cameras away. We'll go back indoors and we'll edit this video and see what it looks like. So until the next video, we'll be looking at wrapping this series up with some of the questions you've been asking and trying to give you some answers to them. So until then, thanks again for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. Goodbye for now.